Good evening, guys. It's your guy J Crew to you, coming at you again with another video here on YouTube. This day being again March 12th, 2022. My second video this evening. I want to talk to you about my second video was an event that happened last weekend. It's an event that's known as the NFL Combine. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with that, it's an event where the top football prospects from college football, no matter what level of competition they come from, are invited to come in and do a personal workout for scouts across the league. They basically do what you would think of as a physical interview. What I mean by that, they do like a variety of different track and field oriented events combined with football exercises that show their range of skills. They'll do a long jump. They'll do a vertical jump. They'll run what's known as probably the most known event there is a 40-yard dash, which measures how fast they can run over a distance of 40 yards in seconds. And they'll also get measured. They get their height, weight, hands measured, and what made this year's event so significant for me personally, me being a Georgia football fan, a University of Georgia Bulldog football fan, of course, they won the national championship for the first time in 41 years, about a little bit over a month ago now. And so they had several prospects there. Not every one of them performed at the Combine, and I'll get in that in a minute, but most of them who showed up performing. What was so staggering was that, man, they showed out. Like UGA football players, they look really good, not only with their measurables. For the most part, they were as tall and big as they were advertised, but their speed was just phenomenal. And there were a couple of guys, even in that area, that stood out for me personally. But I'm just sort of give a general overview of some of the guys who performed at the Combine this year. Like in the picture here that you're looking at on the screen, you're seeing a guy by the name of Zamir White. He was known as Zeus while he was at Georgia. I think he was there 4 years, I believe. And he's had, a remarkable story that I'll get into here shortly. But let me see who's the first player that they have on this little page that I brought up. As you can see, I'll get into Zamir White in a few minutes. The first guy they had here that was there at the Combine was wide receiver George Pickens. And what's phenomenal about George Pickens is if you watch him over the past 3 years, he's been pretty much UGA's most reliable receiver. He's been perceived as their best receiver that they've had. As you can see, he measuring at 6'3", 195 pounds. But that third statistic in this column here for George Pickens is what stunned me. When I watched George Pickens when he was at UGA, he never looked all that fast to me with his downfield speed. A matter of fact, when he went downfield, a lot of times when I remember seeing him catch a long pass, he would have to dive to catch the ball. And generally what that meant was that he had a lack of speed. But as you can see, when George Pickens ran the 40, he ran at 4.47. That's 4.47 seconds that he ran over 40 yards. And keep in mind, George Pickens didn't really play this year until like the end of the year. He blew his ACL out like in the spring. And so I'm thinking that's going to affect all his statistics. I'm thinking that he's not probably going to want to run a 40 until maybe his personal workouts at UGA. He said, forget it, I'm going to go ahead and do it right now. And this dude ran 4.47. I think that's remarkable. I think that's incredible. I just did not expect that. And for people who don't know, when these guys perform at the Combine every year, this is an event that's hosted every year in late February, early March. That's one of the main drills they look at is the 40-yard dash, especially for guys who are considered to be skilled position players, running backs, linebackers, DBs, defensive linemen, wide receivers. They look at the 40-yard dash because they want to see how fast you are in terms of pure speed, but pure speed, but that's remarkable that George Pickens was able to do that, given that he's coming off an ACL tear. And the second guy that is mentioned here was Zamir White. And his story is just pretty much remarkable. For anybody who's ever followed Zamir White, he's the guy that he had a very tough life. He's from Laurinburg, South Carolina, North Carolina. And he was their running back. During Zamir White's senior year in high school, he basically I think he ran for over 2,000 yards, but in the playoffs, he tore up one of his knees, so he had an ACL injury that ended his senior year. So cut the preseason practice before his freshman year at Georgia. I think he was running down the field covering the kick, and I think he already had a brace on one of his knees because he was still recovering from a knee injury. He ended up messing up another knee injury in preseason drills at his first season at Georgia. So that was another letdown. And so it was just, it's not his fault. And I think Kirby Smart had to feel questions about it. They were like, reporters were asking him, hey, man, why you had this dude running down the field on drills? You already know he's recovering from one ACL injury. He's like, nah, man, that's just the way we do it here. They expect a lot of their starters to play special teams. And so they have to play really, really hard to earn time on the field. But either way, Kirby Smart, kind of answered the question in that way. And I think at the time, some people kind of took his answer as being kind of flippant. But that's just how they do it at Georgia. But it was just a huge letdown. And that's just a microcosm of what Zamir White had to go through. When he was young, I think he had like a lot of developmental problems physically. He had a cleft lip. He had to have a lot of surgeries during his childhood because I think, his development wasn't proper. He basically just had a lot of health-related issues, and he wasn't expected to live that long when he initially was born. And I think there were times maybe he was a little bit, he probably grew up poor. He had a hard time, financially growing up. He just had, I'm just kind of giving a little summation because I want to get to other players. But he had a very tough life growing up. Like his whole time with Laurinburg, North Carolina, I believe it is. But either way, he measured, it says 6 foot, but I think he was actually like 5'11" and 3/4. They just gave him that fourth of an inch. He was 214 pounds, and I was stunned by his 40-yard dash. After 2 major knee injuries less than a year apart, one on each knee, I expected Zamir White to be like in the high 4.5s. Because early in his UGA career, when he finally did get on the field, it took him some time to get his speed back. He ran hard and he looked very strong, but you didn't see great speed from him early on. But you saw really good quickness, but not really good foot speed. In 2020 last year, I want to say on the first offensive play of the game, they did like a toss left sweep to him. He ran about 75 yards on the first offensive play in the game for the Bulldogs. He looked very, very fast when he ran there. So he looked like he kind of got some of his speed back on the play like that. And this year, I think there were different plays or multiple plays where he had long runs, so his speed looked good, but it still looked like to me more 4.5-ish. So I expected him to be like 4.59, 4.56, somewhere in there. That dude came in and ran a 4.4 flat. He ran the 40-yard dash in 4.40 seconds. That's incredible for a guy who's had knee injuries like that. That's unbelievable. So I was very happy for Zamir White, just in general. He was one of my pleasant surprises and one of the guys I was happiest for at the Combine. As you can see right here, James Cook was the other running back at UGA. If you saw him play, you really just like watching this dude play football. He's 5'11", 199 pounds, and he ran a 40-yard dash at 4.42 seconds. I thought James Cook was going to be more or less like a 4.5 guy. But I guess I shouldn't be because he had a lot of explosive plays in his career at UGA. He had a lot of long catch passes. He had some long runs. And, man, it's like when you watch both Zamir White and James Cook, if either one of those guys would have got all the carries throughout their career, they could have easily had like 1,000 yards every year they were starters at UGA. But, it wasn't to be. So James Cook's measurables was pretty good. And I think I was more impressed by James Cooks' weight. He was maybe like 185. He wasn't that powerful looking of a runner. But 199 to me is good enough for me. He could be more of a scout back dude. And 4.42, that's excellent. Jordan Davis. This was the guy that stole the show, according to most NFL scouts. Not for me personally, but for NFL scouts. Jordan Davis was as he is advertised. He was 6'6", 341 pounds. And this dude ran the 40-yard dash in 4.78 seconds. You guys might say, well, that sounds kind of slow. But yeah, Jordan Davis is 6'6", 341. A man that big should be running that fast. I would even implore you all to watch his 40-yard dash on YouTube. You can tell he looks fast for a guy his size. That is staggering that a man that big can run that fast. And just look at the little note they put down there. 4.78, which is the fastest ever for a player over 310 pounds and second in his position. That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. He's going to be a top 10, top 15 pick, by the way. That's just NFL level stuff. Travon Wyatt was a guy who didn't get as much fanfare when he was at UGA, but yeah, he made plays this year. I remember his name come up a lot. He measuring at 6'3", 304. He ran a 4.77. He was the fastest defensive tackle there. So again, a little bit less notable of a name, but when you playing beside Jordan Davis and the rest of those defensive players, sometimes you ain't gonna get mentioned like that. But Travon Wyatt is known to be a solid player. He's a solid prospect. This is the guy that for me that got me votes jacked up was Trayvon Walker. If it weren't for Jordan Davis, most people probably talking about Trayvon Walker. Trayvon Walker was always known as a guy who has elite skill, but I think he would never have put together impressive statistics because who played around him? Number one, his teammate Jordan Davis. He also played by another defensive end / linebacker, Nolan Smith, who's going to come back to Georgia for one more year. And he played around another guy, Nakobe Dean, who I'm going to get to in a minute. A linebacker. He was the nation's best linebacker, I believe. And so Trayvon Walker didn't get a lot of mention throughout the year. But look at some of his measurables. His measurables are on the level of probably a guy who some people probably peg as the best defensive end prospect ever, Jadeveon Clowney, when he came out a decade ago, or a little bit over a decade ago, whenever Jadeveon Clowney came out for the draft from the University of South Carolina. Trayvon Walker has similar measurables. Trayvon Walker was 6'5" and some change, 272, and ran 40 yards in 4.51 seconds. That's faster than a lot of running backs and receivers. That's incredible. That's incredible. I mean, it just was unbelievable. I think that guy, he started off as a defensive tackle, I think in his first year at Georgia. I think Trayvon Walker was like 295, 300. But he slimmed down and they made it into a defensive end, which shows you how well Kirby Smart knows how to coach, defensive players and knows how to place them, along with some of his positional coaches. I always thought that was the right move for Trayvon Walker because I never thought he was big enough to compete as a tackle. I thought he was a little bit too slender for that. He was too quick. So I think they properly are going to place him at defensive end. This dude, he one of these guys, he could be a pleasant surprise if he's drafted by the right team. He's one of those guys I wish the Atlanta Falcons had the opportunity to draft, but I don't think he's going to be there. I don't think Atlanta's going to be able to draft him like quick enough. I wish they had an opportunity to draft this guy because I think he's going to be a much better pro player than he was a college player. Moving on. Jamari Sawyer. He was a guy, I think he played both offensive guard and tackle while he was at UGA. His height was overstated while he was at UGA by 1 inch. I think, they advertised him at 6'4", but he was 6'3", 321. And I think he's going to be probably within the first 3 rounds of Jamari Sawyer. He was a solid player for him. He's a real good player. And one of the reasons why they were able to remain consistent at offensive line. This next guy, it was one of the guys I knew he was going to test well at the combine, but Channing Tindall, the only thing that he's really lacking is, I think, his read and recognition skills, and just maybe he could be initially slow in diagnosing plays, which is what I meant when I just said read and recognition skills. He was known to always be one of the better athletes, but he didn't really start until his senior year. Channing Tindall was 6'2", 230 pounds. He ran the 40 in 4.47 seconds. Had a 42-inch vertical leap, which is best among everybody. 42 inches. And so he was known to be elite athletically, but he didn't really put it together until his last year. So I think his mentals are going to be, as some people say, like in the street, where his mental capacity is one of the things he's going to have to develop in order for him to be like a really good player in the NFL. But he has the tools. That's the thing about Channing Tindall. He has the tools. He was known to all be very, very quick, and excellent size. But it was just his mental understanding of what he needed to do. That's what he was lacking. And I remember at times during this year, I think Nakobe Dean had to go get on him because he was caught out of position on certain plays. So a lot of talent, a lot of ability from Channing Tindall. Another guy who probably didn't get as much fanfare is another linebacker named Quay Walker. But he was very solid. He was consistent. And so I think whoever drafts Quay Walker, they're going to get a solid player. I don't know if he's going to be spectacular, but he was solid throughout his UGA career. He played a lot of football. I think he maybe was a junior this past year. I think they got him at 6'4". I think maybe he was 6'3" and some change in the combine, 241 and a 4.52. Ran a 40-yard dash in 4.52 seconds. That's exceptional for a guy who weighs that much. So that tells you that Quay Walker, I think he's going to be a guy who's going to be kind of steal in this draft. He's a good player. But again, he's on the defense side of the ball at Georgia. And he just doesn't get the publicity because of who's around him. Another guy who most people probably didn't think of, this guy really stunned me with his 40. The safety, Lewis Seen. I believe this year probably was the first year he really started like that. And he measured at 6'2", 199, ran the 40-yard dash in 4.37 seconds. That's like cornerback speed. and his broad jump is 11 feet 1 inch, best among safeties. Lewis Seen was known to be a good player when he came out of high school. I think he may be out of Texas somewhere. His numbers are elite. And so, and I liked him as a player. He's physical. He even knocked himself out of a game or two because he was hitting people so hard. So Lewis Seen really impressed. Darion Kendrick. I mentioned earlier that most Georgia players performed at the combine positional drills. Darion Kendrick was a starting cornerback this year for UGA. But keep in mind, he was at Clemson before that. He played like his first 3-4 years at Clemson. And so Darion didn't really get to Georgia to his senior year. And this shows you how smart he was and where he picked his destination to be, because he won a national championship. But I think he's the reason that he didn't perform. People question his speed. Sometimes when you watch Darion, he appears to be more in the 4.5s. And so I'm thinking what he's doing, he's trying to play this clever. He has good size. 6 foot, 194 pounds. He has really, really good size. But I think his speed is the big question. So I think he wants to get ready for his pro day. And keep in mind, with a lot of drills that are performed at these guys' pro days, they tend to do better at pro days for whatever reason. Maybe they have a little more time to prepare. They tend to do better. And even the punter, look at this. 6'1", 191, Jake Camarda. 6'1", 191, 4.56, which was best for the punters. Even with the punters, UGA kind of just stole it. And then Justin Schaefer, he was another offensive guard who started. 6'4", 314, 4.51 in the 40. You can see the rest of his measurables there. And then the other guy I want to talk about who didn't perform, Nakobe Dean. And I mentioned him before. Nakobe Dean, I think he probably was the nation's best linebacker. Nakobe Dean's statistics would not be on the level of a guy who was probably one of the best linebackers I ever seen not only at UGA but in college football period. Roquan Swift 3 or 4 years ago when he was at Georgia. But that's because the talent that Nakobe Dean had around him. Really with the defensive players I just mentioned not long before this. He measured at 5'11", which is short for a linebacker, but he's 229, which is good for today's linebackers. I was stunned that Nakobe Dean didn't really perform. I thought he would have been one of the guys that probably would have added to this show-stealing performance by UGA players. I'm expecting him to run probably like 4.4 at least, about 4.45, 4.48, somewhere in there. I mean, if he runs a 4.5, I wouldn't be too stunned. But I'm expecting him to do well. But I was surprised, man. I don't know if he's recovering from an injury or something. I was surprised that guy didn't do anything at the combine. But I want to see what he does at his pro day. And again, I'm gonna close that video by saying that. I mean, these guys did so well, man. It made me wonder at times, did somebody pay these scouts off just to promote Georgia? So it just seemed like somebody, Kirby Smart or somebody paid all these guys up. Like every single Georgia player that performed just exceeded expectation to me. They exceeded expectation. It was incredible to watch. It was incredible. And I'm like, man, that was just some more promotion for UGA. But again, I just want to give you an overview of what I saw at the combine last weekend here. For the University of Georgia football national champions. Go Dogs. I'm going to close out this video by saying, if you like the content, hit the like button. If you want to subscribe, hit the subscribe button. It's your guy, J. Crew to you. Coming at you with my second video here for March 12th, 2022. Y'all have a good one.